All right, Jason, welcome to the show. How's it going, man? How are you?
Going fantastic. Got a week off here, and I'm kind of enjoying being around the house and taking a little time off. You know, traveling takes a little bit out of you every now and then, and but I'm good right now.
Awesome. Yeah, it's U.S. Open week, so we'll get into it a little bit. But
Yeah,
ultimately, this is the I think 20th video that we're on now, in a set of videos where, it's questions I've been asking on, with high level amateurs and mini tour guys and stuff for years, which is what's the difference, right? So I kind of want to jump into your backstory a little bit about who you are, what you're doing, and this will really be a different kind of a story because we haven't had anybody on from a tour truck fitting perspective. So this will be pretty cool.
awesome.
Cool.
Well, yeah.
So
So
yeah,
I mean, my background as far as that goes is, I played in college. I played at Division One school, Stephen F. Austin, which, ironically enough, I found out just in the last couple of weeks that they've actually dropped their men's and women's program from their school. So I was very unhappy to hear about
no
that. But
kidding.
things go the way they go.
Yeah, for what it's worth, my both the schools I played college golf at don't exist anymore. I played
Yeah.
I
So
played college golf at Lindenwood, Belleville, and Johnson and Wales in Miami, Florida, and both schools are both gone.
yeah, that's great. Well, at least the whole. I mean, they still have Division One sports, but they don't have a golf team anymore. Unfortunately, it's very saddening to hear. And I hear there's a few guys that are trying to get a booster club up to try to get the men's and women teams, men's and women teams back. But I'm not sure how that's going to go at the moment. But I'm trying to stay in touch with the guys and see if we can get something going. From college, I tried to play a little bit on the mini tours, but didn't have a whole lot of backing. I did have one guy that helped me along a little way, but his business was kind of hit by the recession in 2000, 2006, 2007. So he had to take the hit, and I had to get three jobs. I was working basically as a club fitter at the PGA Tour Superstore. I was working as a teacher for a program that was called Total Golf Adventures that we went to grade schools after hours and helped kids, be introduced to the game. And then I was a caddy at Preston Trail Country Club, which I love that because Preston Trail was so awesome. It was such a great track. And I got to play it on Mondays if I had time in the afternoon after I got off work in the morning from the PGA Tour Superstore to play it. So it was a pretty good opportunity to get on a great golf course and, caddy for some great players. There were only a few PGA Tour players that were members there, but I got to caddy for some really great guys like Brett Hall and some other guys like that were living in the area at the time.
Yeah,
And,
no,
and, and from there, got out of the golf business for about a year, did some odd jobs, got back into the PGA Superstore as specifically a club builder and fitter and got a job opportunity with Adams Golf. Adams Golf was fantastic. I love that place. I still miss it to this day. Got hired into customer service originally, and then from there I moved into custom club fitting and then VIP fittings, which is how I kind of got my introduction into the tour fittings, where we had a couple of mini tour players come in. I dealt well with those guys, was able to fit them into things that they liked, that they needed. And then I was kind of thrown into the fire. I was still working in customer service this entire time, and my future boss, Jason Williams, who worked for PXG in the future and a couple of other companies, he took me to Louisiana, which was the first Korn Ferry Tour event inside the U.S. each year. It was in Lafayette, and he actually kind of let me go. It was one of those things where he brought me there on Monday, let me fill the tour truck with what I needed, and then disappeared. And he'll tell the story to this day. But yeah, he kind of left me behind and threw me in the fire. And I got some new clubs in play that week that we didn't have before. And that was kind of my start into the tour job. So from there, I worked on the Corn Ferry Tour, which was the web.com tour at the time, for I think 2.5 years. And then TaylorMade had bought us. I got transferred over to the Champions Tour for a little while. And then kind of the business didn't go the way that TaylorMade wanted us to go. And they ended up closing down shop at Adams. And I ended up moving to St. Louis with my wife, which we had just gotten married in November of that year, and got back into the retail business a little bit and was still trying to get tour jobs here and there. But, there were so many guys that had been let go from Nike and other companies like that. There was so much competition for the jobs that it was just really hard to land a job on in any tour department whatsoever. So, I waited about 10 years and kind of stayed in touch with a couple of guys and got a good job opportunity with UST about 10 years later and was able to, interview and get hired and got back into it. And, I had played UST Mamiya shafts basically the entire time that I had been out of the golf business. I never played anything else. So it was a great opportunity with a company that I knew the product, I knew it very well, I knew how it performed, and I knew where they wanted to go. And sure enough, I got the job, and I've been on the Korn Ferry Tour almost 5 years now, working for UST Mamiya, and we've made leaps and bounds just kind of growing the brand. And we've got guys like Ben Griffin that he's on fire right now, so everything's turning out great for us.
Yeah, I have to imagine that on tour, seeing success with someone like Ben Griffin or Alistair, is it Alistair or Alistair as
Alistair, yeah,
well?
Alistair
Yeah,
Doherty, yeah.
Alistair. I mean, when you have guys like that who are having success, I have to imagine that, other tour pros are kind of looking around like, hey, what's going on over here kind of deal.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just
they
the
are.
nature of us as
And we've
golfers.
absolutely. That's kind of how Fujikura caught on. You get a couple of hot golfers that are using a certain shaft. Guys see the graphics on it and say, wow, what is that? So they ask for it. They try it and, they love it. So, we're kind of in that little transitional period right now where we've got something that's really good, really stable. Guys depend on it. They're putting their jobs on the line each week with it and they're having success. So we're in a good spot right now, and I'm really happy about that. And from the Corn Ferry Tour perspective of it, we're growing every single week, and more guys are noticing, what we've got, and they're asking for it. And I haven't had that happen the first couple of years that I was out on tour, and now it's happening, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So, while we're on the topic, maybe walk us through what a standard week kind of looks like, and then maybe what a fitting would look like for a driver.
Okay. So, as far as the standard week goes, we usually come in Sunday night, maybe early Monday morning, as far as actually getting to the tournament. And, there's always a pro-am on Monday. There's always a pro-am on Wednesday. But we try to get our work done mainly from Monday afternoons to, maybe Tuesday afternoon, early Wednesday morning. Guys are always asking for new stuff. There's a lot of tinkerers out there on tour that like to try new things. There's certain course setups that don't necessarily work each week for every club they have in the bag, and that's kind of where we kind of get involved with the OEMs. And we may have a Callaway rep say, "Hey, I've got a guy looking for a 5 wood. Is there anything that you suggest? He's already playing one of your shafts. Can we maybe try to transition that shaft into the club that they're looking for this week?" And we'll take it from there. And it could work out, it could not. They may try two or three, maybe four different shafts at the time, just to try to get the right spin rates, right launch angle, the right window that they're looking for, and of course, more important is the yardage that they're looking for. And
So,
then,
question I've always
yeah, yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah. So I've always had whenever it comes to regards driver fitting, right? So I
Hmm.
think let's say probably, I mean, going all the way back to like SLDR days where they were trying to knock the spin down like crazy, right? Like dating myself here, but like when SLDR came out, like it was all the rage, right?
Yeah, loft up, spin down, right?
So my question is, has this like do the sweet spots change when you get to tour and have like sort of a different level? Like I feel like I've I've gained ball speed, I've wanted more spin. Like as crazy as that sounds, like there's a threshold, right? But like I don't want 1900 spin knucklers anymore. Like I would rather play a driver around like 25 or like 26, which is maybe
Absolutely.
a little bit higher, but do you find that to be a thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, ideally, depending on launch angle and spin rate, obviously, you want to find something between 23 and 2400 RPMs. Maybe for a guy who draws the ball, you may want him up in 2600 to where it stays in the air a little bit longer. And it also, again, depends on where they strike it on the face, where are their misses. If a guy tends to miss high and on the toe, you obviously want to have a little bit more spin on that golf ball because it's not going to nosedive and duck left. So for guys who hit it off the heel more often, well, maybe you want something a little bit lower spin to where it doesn't necessarily rise and flare out to the right and they lose distance. So it's all player dependent. It's all really ball speed and launch angle dependent too, because the guys who launch it lower obviously need a little bit higher spin to keep it in the air a little bit longer, and the guys who launch it higher don't necessarily need that much spin because they're carrying it with their ball speed and their launching. So it's all every fit is a different fit. There's no perfect launch angle, no perfect spin for everybody, but there is a window that you can get into, between that 22, 24, 2600 RPM range that kind of would be the ideal spin rate for just about everybody.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen it, and I was even speaking with Ben Haddon when he was on the show, and like he's got like 195-mile-an-hour ball speed. And I told
Yeah.
him after the show, I go, dude, have you tried anything around like 2600 spin? Because he's a fader of the ball, and he's like, nah, that's like way too much spin. I'm like, you would hit it.
No,
I think you would hit it straighter, but I could be wrong. But like,
no, you be right.
yeah, and he was like, nah, I just want to. He, obviously nukes it, but it's like, dude, if he can keep a driver on the planet, he's so good. And so
Yeah.
it was just interesting
I know Ben a
conversation.
little bit, yeah. So
Yeah,
it's big on the mishits more than it is the solid shots. I mean, all those guys hit it so good whenever they hit it good. But whenever they miss it, you want to try to minimize the miss. So generally, the more spin you have on miss hits toward the heel and the toe, the better. And the less spin you have on low shots, you want to be on, the low spin side. But on the high shots, you kind of want to be in that mid range. So I mean, they all hit it in the center of the face for the most part. Again, it's player to player, it's ball speed to ball speed, it's launch angle to launch angle, and trying to figure out what fits that player that particular week. And it could change from week to week. You just never know.
so Scott Fawcett was on here and he was talking about a kind of like a minimum viable product. And we've had like a lot of conversations, minimum viable product in terms of ball speed. He says it's 180. I've had, James Nicholas say it's as low as like 165. I've had, Ben agree with the 180. All kinds of answers. So, do you see anybody come through with below 170 at this point anymore on Corn Ferry
Well,
Tour?
absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely. There's plenty of guys out there that can still game it with 165 ball speed.
Interesting.
I mean, I don't want to give away any names or anything like that,
Wait,
but
sure.
yeah, there's plenty of guys out there that can still ball with 165 ball speed. And it's because when you get to those scoring clubs in the 5 iron to I mean, even if you have a 7 wood in the bag, they're throwing darts,
Yeah.
absolutely throwing darts. So, and their short games are impeccable. And that's the main ingredient there is that if they're inside 50 yards, they're down in two.
It's interesting. So that kind of segues us. At least we'll start out here and then we'll loop back around to fitting stuff. The topic of the show is what's the difference? Like, that to me would be a big difference maker. Some of the main ones that have come on so far, ball speed's one of them, but it's kind of been dispelled. So it's interesting to hear your take, also kind of dispelling it.
Yeah.
That you have to have 180 ball speed to compete at the highest level.
No.
You have to have excellent lag putting. I don't think anyone's going to disagree with that. No one
Yeah.
has. You have to have a great mental game. Obviously, we kind of get into the intricacies of it. And then short game is something that's really not been brought up a whole lot, other than by Tim O'Neill, Champions Tour winner. Like, he was
Yeah,
the
and
only one who's
Tim
brought it up.
O'Neill knows it too. Tim
Yeah,
O'Neill knows
and he's the
short
only one
game.
who's
That
brought it
guy can
up.
get up and down out of a wet paper bag, I can promise you.
And what's so funny is he had said that his short game wasn't good enough when he first got on the Champions Tour, and that's when
Hmm.
he started getting better. And when he like actually was able to win, he changed a little bit of strategy and he changed his short game. Like he worked on his short game. So it's interesting to
Yep.
hear that.
Yep. It's all about inside of 100 yards for those guys, man. I mean, if you have the confidence to, if you hit it 60 yards offline in the trees and you chip out to, 75 yards, if you know you're going to get up and down, then you're not scared of missing fairways. So it all bleeds back from the green to the tee box. So for these guys who, they may have 180 ball speed, but if they have the hands to get up and down around the greens, man, that's a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah. So, ultimately for you, you feel like the short game and inside 100 yards is probably the biggest difference maker for the players at that level that you've seen.
Oh, absolutely. It's not even
Yeah.
funny. I just in Raleigh, North Carolina, they have a short game area that basically surrounds the entire. It's the most awesome short game area I've ever seen. From You can hit every single shot from 125 yards in to any green that you want to, And it's just, I mean, it's no more than, 125 yards long and 125 yards wide, but they have six or seven greens that you can hit to any target on off of a wet lie, a tight lie, a thick lie. They have 25 bunkers on this thing, and the shots that I see these guys hit and not even take a blade of grass, it's unreal. I mean, they're taking out a 60 from 10 feet off the green, throwing it 10 feet in the air, and it stops within a foot of the hole when they've landed it within a foot of the hole. I mean, the hands that these guys have are amazing. It's unbelievable. And then they'll take, a 52 degree and basically hit this low skipper into the hill that hops up, stops, and rolls out to a foot to the hole. I mean, their imaginations are incredible. They had every shot that you can think of.
Yeah, I think there's really been a shift in a trend that I've noticed in talking to enough people. Like I spoke with Derek Domensky from Golf Better Tucson, who's short game coach of Sahith and Homa and Eric Van Roy and all these guys. And the main thing that he works on is kind of exactly what you're talking about, which is skills. Like they're not overly technical, but they're working on the skill to be able to hit the high floater and the cutter and the drawer and all these sort of things to allow them to be able to do that. And we're really seeing a change in instruction and the way the game is played in terms of skills. Like I think, for me especially, I kind of grew up in an era where perfecting a golf swing was like so important. And it's like you're like building a car, but then you don't really know how to drive it. If that makes sense, like you can have a good looking car, but like if you don't know where the club face is, you're screwed. And I think I'm really starting to see a shift. Maybe it's just that I've done this show, but a shift in instruction and in the way that players are looking at the game now.
Well, I mean, to me, you can actually see that in the golf swings that are making it to tour now. It's not everybody's a cookie cutter golf swing. There's a lot of different golf swings that do it a lot of different ways, but and you can take into instance the Titleist Performance Center where they figured out a way to make your body move the way it needs to move to produce the best possible shot that you can hit, you know, day in and day out and make it consistent. So the Titleist Performance Institute has been leaps and bounds the greatest asset to, 99% of the tour players that's out there because they've figured out a formula that doesn't necessarily mean that every player is doing the same exact thing every time, but they figured out how to make guys be able to play their best with what they have at all times. And I think that's probably been the biggest change in golf in the last 25 years as far as, golf swing goes. And you can see it on every single tour player on every single range. Nobody swings it the same anymore. It's not that cookie cutter, Tiger Woods, Adam Scott, perfect. Here's your positions, get on all those. It's the positions that that player needs to get into to perform their best. And I think that's been the biggest change in golf, especially in the last 25 years. That, you could say, well, it's maybe TrackMan helping these guys get better. Well, it might be a little bit during practice, but I think it's probably just understanding the athleticism that you have and making the best of it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think there's a really valid point there, and just a little plug doing some interesting work with the founders of Aimpoint on something very similar to this in terms of getting the most out of your own skill and whatnot.
Hmm.
So, want to circle back now to kind of the fitting process. I know you'd mentioned they're not always super similar, but maybe the differences between fitting for a driver and a 3-wood, because I feel like a 3-wood sometimes is one that doesn't always need to be a rocket ship, but you need it to be a rocket ship sometimes, but you also need to be able to hit like floaters and different shots with it. So like, how do you do that and how do you deal with that?
Well, again, it's two different golf swings. It's two different shots. Typically, a guy is looking for a certain distance with a 3-wood. He's not looking for a bomb shot on tour anyway. He wants something that's not going to go as far as his driver 99% of the time. And he wants something that's, he's not going to miss hit and it's going to go as far as his 3-iron. So what we look for is, it's not so much a certain launch window with 3-woods. It's more of a distance. They don't care if it goes high, if it goes low. It's more of, can I hit this number consistently? So, with driver, it's trying to get the guys in the thing that they hit the most consistent with the right shot shape and ball flight that they look for and that they know is not going to go a direction that they don't want it to go. So if they don't want it to go right, well, we're going to make it to go left, and then they can just rip at it and not have to worry about it. But with a 3 wood, it's a little bit different. And you see a lot of guys going to mini drivers now because of that. Some of the 3 woods now get a little bit hot sometimes, where you'll catch one a little high on the face and they'll jump. And if you catch one low on the face, they don't go anywhere. So the mini driver trend, I think, is around for at least for tour players, is kind of around to stay because most of those guys don't hit 3 woods into greens very often. So you have guys, looking for a club that, yeah, if I have to hit it off the ground, can I get it in the air? If I want to hit it off the tee, is it going to go a certain distance every single time? And I don't have to worry about that crazy jumper that runs through the fairway. If I've got a dog leg, dog leg left, dog leg right, doesn't matter. And then can I move it right to left to right? So we're looking for the right launch, a consistent ball speed, and then a consistent spin. That way, if they want to work it right to left, the spin's not going to dip too much and it's going to run through. And if they want to work it left to right, it's not going to spin too much and, peter out before it gets to the corner. So,
Yeah, no, I think that's great. With question I have with, let's say for example, you mentioned you have a player, let's say, that doesn't want to miss it left, right? Maybe they're fader of the ball, they don't want to miss it left. Are you doing that primarily with the OEM head, or are you able to do that with shaft as well? Because I would think, let's say for example, like a triple diamond head, in my opinion, it sits open, it's fade bias. The Callaway triple diamond head sits open, fade bias. At least every experience I've ever had with it, right? Are you doing something with shafts to do it that way, or is it more the head that's doing that fitting, making
well,
it not miss it left?
we can actually do both. And we can do it in, 3 different ways. We could go with, face angle. We could go with internal weighting, which, the old rat glue thing. We can move weight internally with rat glue. We can move weights, of course, now with just a turn of a screw. And then we can adjust lie angle, obviously. And then loft. Loft obviously closes the face a little bit, so that it gives them a little bit more spin, a little bit more left bias. And then we can obviously change it with shaft. Usually we have 3 different options with shafts, and our low launch, low spin option is typically going to be the more right bias option. We have an option that is a little bit stiffer in the midsection, a little bit softer in the tip and handle. And being softer in the tip generally promotes, the face to close a little bit faster. And then we have a higher launch kind of mid spin option that is even softer in the tip, softer in the midsection, and stiffer in the handle. So it's much easier to turn over. So again, you just kind of have to match those things up. If you've got a super low spin head, but you have a guy that wants to be able to turn it over, maybe you would go with the stiffer handle and the softer tip, and then change the internal weighting of the head to try to keep the spin down, and then work from there. It's just again all player dependent and how they deliver the club. Some guys have a little steeper angle of attack. Some guys pick it off the tee, and some guys load it differently than others. So if you've got a guy who has a quicker transition, maybe you want to go with something that's a little stiffer in the handle to where it keeps up with them. If you've got a guy with a little silkier transition, you may go with something that's softer in the handle, and then make up the difference with how you weight the head.
It's really interesting. Obviously, I know some about it, but I was nowhere near what you know. And whenever I switched to the driver shaft that I'm currently playing, the whole reason I switched to it because it felt like it stayed with my hands. Like I switched to a 3 wood shaft and switched to a driver shaft for the whole purpose of it stayed with my hands. And I didn't even really know why. I was just like, this thing stays with me. And that was why I
Mm-hmm.
kind of had switched to it. So it's just kind of interesting to hear, there's different shaft biases that maybe one will stay with different tempos for different purposes. I'd kind of from a Ventus perspective, I knew the black, blue, and the red. Those are like the easiest to kind of
Mm-hmm.
put together. But I would imagine you guys kind of have some sort of a similar
Yeah,
color
it's very
coding or
similar.
pattern or whatever. Yeah.
Yep, very similar. And there's different bend points and different shafts. And the old adage of kick point is all that matters. There is no kick point in a shaft. There's a bend profile. Where the shaft
Okay.
bends and
I
where it
didn't know
doesn't
that.
bend, again, is all player dependent. Because, at a certain swing speed, a shaft is not going to bend in the same place for one person as it does for another. So there's that factor as well.
No, I think that's super interesting. So, maybe talk a little bit about the success that you guys have had on tour as of late. You mentioned, that it's really growing. Maybe talk, kind of a little bit what you can tell me about the stories about, some of your guys with either Ben or Alistair and those guys, kind of how that came to be.
Yeah, so basically, I came out on the Korn Ferry tour roughly 5 years ago, and we hadn't had anybody out on tour for about, I'd say, 6 years on the Korn Ferry tour. Anyway, we had a PGA Tour rep, and he was doing well, and he wasn't kind of getting the feed from the graduates that he had been in the past with the prior rep that had been out there. So whenever I got the opportunity, he was happy to have somebody, out there to kind of feed guys up and graduate guys to the tours. My first year, I think I went. I don't want to state numbers, but I think I ended up. I know I graduated two players, but we had a rough growth of about 125% in shaft usage over the year, which, if you start with 10 shafts in play, 40 shafts, kind of takes care of that. But the next year I think we had 3 years, three players graduate, made it to the big tour. In fact, we had one win, which was Grayson Murray. He won right away. And then after that, we've graduated three more last year, and then we've got some guys on the way to graduate this year so far. So I don't want to keep my fingers crossed. I don't want to jinx anybody, but I don't want to name any names, especially because that'll really jinx it. We've got
Yeah, we'll,
some
we'll
good
keep that out.
promising players. Yeah, well, we've got some very good promising players that are on their way up, including the Alistair Doherty's of the Corn Ferry Tour that he just actually qualified for the U.S. Open, which was an amazing story. What he went through in the last month is just unreal, and for him to qualify for the U.S. Open was just, I could not have been happier for the guy. He's one of my really good friends, and he could not have been more excited.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's quite the story. I didn't know anything about it until I saw it posted on your Instagram story, and I read it, and I was like, "Holy cow!"
I
For those that don't know, he was in a car accident, right, and had that recovery, and it was a pretty bad car accident, right? To my
Yeah,
understanding.
it was very bad. Yeah, I guess he had just dropped his caddy off, and he was on his way back to his Airbnb. Pulled out of I guess a Wendy's. He was grabbing some snacks or something, and I don't know if somebody ran a red light or what, but they T-boned him, and if he hadn't been in that minivan, it would have been bad. And anybody who would have been in the passenger seat would have been in bad shape too. But luckily, there he was the only one in the car. He came out safe, nothing really other than a couple of bumps and bruises and some glass shatter cuts. I went and saw him the next day. It's funny. The first thing that he texted me was, "Hey, I need a new driver. Was just in a bad car crash. Like, dude, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you fine? Do I need to come see you?" And
He's
he's like,
worried about the
I
driver.
just need, yeah, I need a new driver. So I got that taken care of for him pretty quickly. I went and saw him the next day, and he was a little swollen and everything, but he was in good spirits. He wasn't able to play that weekend. He wanted to try to tee it up on Thursday, but his body just wasn't ready, and I think that was a good decision for him to pull out because he obviously rested and was healthy for the U.S. Open qualifier. Was able to make it through the 36-hole qualifier, and man, could not be more proud of that dude.
Yeah, no, I think that's really awesome, and I think it's a pretty cool story, especially he goes on, hopefully make the cut and have some success this week at Oakmont. So be pretty cool.
Yeah, it looks like a tough golf course. I've seen some pictures of the rough from Ben Griffin, and it is not fun.
It's
You want to hit it straight.
Yeah, yeah. So, do those guys change anything in terms of fitting? Like, let's say, for example, maybe they're changing tee height, they're pegging it down a little bit. Are they having to change spin rate? Like, does that ever happen, or is it kind of like not really because they're within a reasonable tolerance?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Usually, guys aren't going to change much with driver on those type weeks. They may try a different fairway wood to maybe dig one out of the rough or something like that. Yeah, set makeup wise, you're probably going to see a lot of fairway woods this week. Maybe a few driving irons just to make sure that they can keep it in the fairways. But that golf course is so long, I don't think you'll see many driving irons, in my opinion.
Yeah. Thoughts on the 7 wood fantasy, whatever that's going on right now? You think that's around to stay too?
I love it. It's fantastic. I mean, hybrids have kind of, I don't want to say run their course, but most players find that they tend to go left. I'm not
Oh
sure
yeah,
why.
yeah, they go left.
I mean, with
They go left.
in my day with the Adams hybrids, we kind of built a hybrid that never went left, so we didn't have that issue. So now it's kind of The
But
golf
then that
ball is changed.
offset. I saw an
Yeah,
Adams old school prototype. I was caddying at Bell Reeve this past weekend. He had an Adams prototype pre like acquisition, and the thing had
yeah,
no offset on it. And I'm like, no wonder this
yeah,
thing doesn't go left.
yeah. And it was toe weighted as heck too, man. And
Yeah.
yeah, and they were flat. That was the other thing. We made our hybrids flatter than everybody else's, and that really changed start lines for everybody's hybrids. It didn't start left and work right. It just started on mine. So that's kind of how Adams made their name in hybrids. I mean, we made hybrids that didn't go left for tour players, so we were the number one hybrid on tour. But as far as fairway woods go now, it's not the fairway wood of 15, 18, 20 years ago. They've kind of caught on to the face angles not needing to be as shut to be able to have loft on it. And with the changes in the golf ball where, the harder you hit it, the lower it spins, they kind of need the height. So you see guys with 7, 9 woods, 5 woods that need that height to be able to stop it on the greens. And the forgiveness it's unmatchable. I mean, you hit these things on the heel, you hit them on the toe, you hit them in the center of the face, and they all go the same distance now. You almost can't tell the difference between, if you're standing on the range, you can't tell the difference between a heel toe or a center strike because they're so much more forgiving now. So, the forgiveness of the fairway woods with the better look, better face angles, and then the combination of the lower spin golf balls has just made the fairway woods become a hit, especially on tour. It's like cheating. These guys are throwing darts from 255 yards with a 7 wood. It's funny. You see some of the ball speeds that these guys create on the Korn Ferry Tour with a 5 wood, 7 wood, or even higher than that, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's my driver ball. That's easy. But I mean, I'll give you an example. I think I took a picture of it recently and posted it on Instagram. Alistair's ball speed with his 7 wood is 170. I'm sorry, 8 roughly
It's like my
168 with a 7 wood.
it's like my driver ball. That's like low end driver ball speed for me.
Yeah, it's faster than my ball speed for sure. And he's carrying it. If he wants to, he can carry it 260. He doesn't do it all the time, but he can. So I mean, think about that. When you're on a par five from 260 out, you can throw something way up in the air. What are you going to do? Oh, I'm going to hit a 7 wood.
That's nuts. That's moving it.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
Cool, man. Kind of, as we're looking to wrap up here, I just wanted to give you a chance to plug anything, talk about anything you want, any shaft technology that you guys have going on over there, anything in the pipeline that you can let us in on, or, just anything generally to talk
Well,
about.
we've had a lot of success with the new Link Power Core product. Again, Ben Griffin has won twice with it this year. I think we had some prototypes out last year about April, May, June, and in 3 weeks we had almost 20 in play. It's so stable. It feels good. It's not that boardy, clicky feel at impact. It just feels great. We just recently on tour only added a blue and a red, both slightly counterbalanced, to where you can launch it up in the air and the spin's not going to get crazy, but they're
What does the
slightly
counterbalance
softer.
do? What's the counterbalance do?
Counterbalance typically launches it just a little bit higher, and you could pick up a touch of ball speed from it. And that's what we've seen in our testing so far. With the red, it launches higher than any Link Red that we've had in the past. The blue launches a touch higher than the previous blue version, but still maintains the stable tip and the stable midsection, which the blue is the stiffest midsection that we have in all three of our tour shafts. So you're going to maintain stability and you're not going to get as much droop at impact with that particular shaft. So it's going to be a shaft that typically a drawer of the ball would like that type of profile. But yeah, all three tips are much more stable than the last Link version. A little bit less torque in each one, and the 80-ton material that we're putting in the tips of these things is so stable and feels so good. It's not even.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I definitely will be interested to try it out and give them a go. I've heard big things, and obviously they're doing big things, so that's exciting,
Yeah,
man.
yeah, no, it's been great.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. I guess kind of only other question I have would be, you mentioned driving irons, so are
hmm
you seeing a big, uptick in terms of, guys using driving irons? What kind of spin rates do you look for? Do you have guys that like, I have to imagine that's difficult to fit as well. Are you fitting for the high one? Are you fitting for the low one? Because that feels like a club to me that, that they're moving around a little bit. Is it like, all right, I fit for the high one and then you can do whatever else you want with it? Or is it in between?
Yeah, it's kind of fit. It's all, again, all player dependent, obviously. What we ask the player, what do they want to see um, for a stock shot? And then we kind of go from there. I've had a lot of success with the recoil dart iron shafts. We go from 105 in extra stiff to 120 extra stiff, depending on, if it's a 2 iron or a 3 iron and how heavy do they play their iron shafts. If a guy's in a 130-gram iron shaft, you don't want to put him in a 105-gram 2 iron shaft. That's just going to be too light. So we'll throw them in that 120, and they usually have a little bit higher launch, a touch less spin, but they're able to stop it, which is great. They can stop it with trajectory versus stopping it with spin, and they love that because whenever they want to hit a low shot that comes off the tee and they want it to run, they can usually get it to do that.
Cool. No, I think that's pretty cool. It's been really interesting to kind of learn a little bit about the ins and outs and find out that I was actually correct in terms of the driver stuff. It's all anecdotal for me where I'm like, this kind of stays with my hands and I want a little bit more spin because I feel like my miss isn't as bad. So it's nice to get, those kind of tips from the tour type of deal to affirm my own game. So
Yeah,
interesting.
I mean, you absolutely always want to ask the player, how does it feel first? Because if they tell you that it's too soft, then, it may be the stiffest shaft in the world, but for them, with their tempo, with their speed, with the way they deliver it, it might be too soft for them. So we find something that works for them in their hands and then go from there.
Yeah, that's perfect. I think that's a good point to finish up, man.
Awesome, man.
Thanks for coming on. I appreciate you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate it very much. It was great talking to you.
Cool. Shout out UST. Shout out Summit Rejuvenation and Strokes Gained. Cool.
All right, dude.